Hey, and welcome to Code Reviews. In today's climax video, we take our demo, which looks like this, and turn it into this. Much better. So we've taken our Angular app, we've applied Tailwind CSS, we've totally cleaned up the user flow, and not only that, but we have hosted this on AWS. So it's both live on the internet where you can use it. You can sign in with your Gmail. This is the new look and feel. It tells you when your account was created. You have a sign out button. You have a delete account button. You can still create a new user if you'd like. We have all of the bells and whistles here. And it's the exact same app that you're running here locally with Docker. Can't stress this enough. It's exactly the same. What you see live is what I'm giving you here with the source code. You just need Docker. You need the self-sign cert. I have videos for all this stuff. So if you want to get an app that looks like this, where you can log in with any Gmail and do whatever you want, stick around and let's get started. Let's see how we did it. Adding Tailwind CSS and hosting on AWS improve the look and flow of our Angular front end. Objectives. 1. We're going to enhance the back end for AWS. 2. We're going to install Tailwind CSS in our Angular app and apply the styles. 3. We're going to improve the front end flow. And 4. We're going to host it on AWS. Let's get started. All right. The back-end enhancements for AWS. The first thing we did was update the user controller Java. So we opened up the create user endpoint so all users could use it. When I say we opened it up, I changed the roles for create user to just free user. So anybody who logs in can use it. Before you had to be an admin, but I want people to sign on. I want people to see that you can click this and you can do something. Creates a fake user so you can see that it works and you can re-log in and see that, things still work. Another thing I offered was a delete me endpoint. So you saw on the demo, there's now a way to disable your account. And effectively what this does is it'll soft delete your account. It'll mark you as not enabled. I've controlled for any real emails not being shown, but if you go on AWS, you can disable your account so that it's not enabled and it doesn't show up at all. It decreases the risk of that. I thought it was a nice to have, so I've created a delete me endpoint for you to allow authenticated users to soft delete their account. Go to the localhost, and you can see that here. Delete account, your account has been deleted. Next one, we have the user service. So we wanted the endpoint for delete me. It's just delete without a username. But we needed to create a soft delete user service because I actually use this in 2 places. It's a very simple service. You give it a username. You find by username and enabled as true. So if the user's disabled, don't worry about it. But if we find it by enabled, you get the username. You set enabled to false. You set the roles to an empty set. You reset their roles. And then you just update the user and return that user. And like I said, this is called in a couple places in delete me and delete user. So we needed to create a soft delete user for reuse. In the user repository, like I said, we needed to update, find non-Gmail users by enabled as true. We don't want to expose real user emails when looking for users to show for our demo. Now that I'm hosting this and you log in, I don't want actual Gmail emails to come through. If you create an account and I create an account, I don't want you to see my Gmail. I don't want to see your Gmail. So that list I've changed to a query where you select any username that doesn't have gmail.com. Flip through. So I needed to make that change to not expose any user emails. Now, another thing I wanted to demonstrate was that I have some Spring JPA auditing. So if you go to the Spring docs and you go through auditing, you can actually track things like create date, updated date, last modified by, and I thought it would be worthwhile to demonstrate some of this stuff for you. So I created an abstract audit record. It's an abstract class. It's a map superclass. So I want other entities to extend this abstract class. You have to use this auditing entity listener with the entity listeners. But basically I have the created at, the updated at, and the created by fields, which when this is extended, like it is in user.java, now in the database table, in addition to all these fields, you also have created at, updated at, and created by. I can show that to you here. Log into the DB and I show you users. You can see now there is a created by, created at, and updated at. And that's just a way to demonstrate logging. I did the same thing for roles. So you needed to actually create that class. I needed a config class as well, where you have configuration, you enable JPA auditing, and you need to create an implementation for this audit aware. And this is how you know who was updated by. In this, I have get current auditor. So I use the JWT authentication token, which I get from the security context holder in the authentication method. If there is, and then I use the verify Google Auth token again, using the token value to create a user. If the user is there, then we return the username, which is the email. And if it's not there, return unknown. And once we have this and we wire it in, we're able to use the string created by, which will map to the username, which is an email. So if you click the create button, it'll log this user was created by your username, which is pretty cool. And you can do that for all sorts of stuff if you read more about the Spring JPA auditing. We extended the authenticated user projection. So we wanted to return the created at field to show in the front end. And so authenticated projection, you can see that we have get created at and get photo URL, which are just regular properties with our user entity. That's pretty cool. And then lastly, we added logging. So we have the application fraud properties. We also have application local. And we added logging. So you can update logging very easily. We just log the info level for now. There's some things commented out that you could do to increase the amount of logging. I log it to my temp directory and I just name it pjl application core.log. And then I have the pattern that we use. And all this does is when I start the jar, it will create this log file by default in the temp directory. And if you're running this on Docker, it's going to be in your Docker image TMP directory. So I needed to do that both in local and in production, because when I was on AWS, I wanted access to the logs in case something was going wrong. So those are some of the backend enhancements that we made to get ready for AWS. The next thing we did was install Tailwind CSS, and we applied the styles. So Tailwind has great documentation. They outlined basically exactly what I needed to do to set up Tailwind with Angular. You needed to run npm install, Tailwind CSS, post CSS auto prefixer, and then you initialize Tailwind. You update the Tailwind config.js. I did that. The styles.css, we did this, and then it was basically done. There are a few other things that I added, which was the prettier and the prettier plugin for Tailwind. So Tailwind classes should be set in a certain order, and you'll see there are a lot of classes that we have. And prettier will actually put them in the order that you want, which is good and very helpful, and then it'll do it automatically. And then we have a form. You don't see it because I haven't set up the admin, but we use forms to disable the user. So I needed a special forms update to our package.json file. And then I updated the prettier.config package.json. So we have a bunch of Tailwind stuff, added some to the dependencies, other ones down here for the dev. Then we have the prettier config, which is pretty standard, but we add the prettier plugin for Tailwind CSS. We have the Tailwind config, where we require the Tailwind CSS forms and we copy the rest from the documentation that I showed you. And then in the styles.css, we do exactly what the docs say and we import those styles. So that's just getting your Angular application ready for it. But you need to apply the styles. And so this is applying styles for non-experts like myself. So what I do here is I leverage existing examples because I really don't have a lot of time. I don't care to know. A lot of this is good enough, but they give you the code for something that looks like this. And this is exactly what I ended up taking in the end. I removed some of the bells and whistles that I didn't need, but ultimately this is the same kind of layout as this, except I have less headers. So I will always kind of take existing examples, which I did for the authentication dashboard, which there's a lot going on. So if you really want to look at some of this class code, you can. In the last video, I showed you how we used ngIfs with is not authenticated low. But in terms of classes, I honestly just pulled from, existing examples, and I read through the docs a little bit to know what I was doing here. But yeah, all of these class stuff, I mean, there's just a lot more. But honestly, just take it from, things that already exist, or if you're an expert and you want to help me out, you can help me as well. But there's plenty of code here, and that's kind of what I took from to get it to look good. And I did that for the authentication component, the create button user component, HTML, the flex, width full, justify center, rounded. I'm really just looking at existing stuff here. So there's nothing really special, and I can't even really walk you through it because it's just kind of looking at examples in the docs and seeing what works and what looks good. The other thing I did is prompting. I don't use that much. I use a little bit of Copilot, but honestly, asking ChatGPT I just described it, what I wanted in terms of Tailwind. I want it to look cool. I want it to look modern. I want it to be a footer. It just gave me something. So you'll actually see in the app.component, there's this footer, fixed bottom with full black gray. It kind of gave me this footer to use for all of my social stuff down here that you see both that just maintains on the app. I think it looks pretty good, and I just asked it and it gave it to me. And then I use these font awesome icons. So icons are pretty big, and there's some really good free ones. You can just follow the instructions and add it as a script to your index.html, which is what I did. And that gave me the LinkedIn, the GitHub, the YouTube, and the X. So that's basically, I just copied stuff and played around with the classes, and that's how I got it to look the way that it did. So once I had the look right, I needed to improve the front end flow. And so I extended the Angular HTML. When you sign in, it's up here. It has buttons, it has a drop down, it has a toggle menus. So I had to do that in the authentication dashboard.ts. Basically, I created, open drop down as a Boolean, open mobile menu, and account deleted, just kind of Booleans to hold. And then when you click, you can toggle the browser menu open or closed. Toggle mobile menu, toggle browser menu, that kind of stuff. And so you'll see that littered throughout. The logout button, so you have logout user, which closes the drop down, and then it calls sign out. You have delete account, which has similar things where you run the delete me subscription service, and if it's deleted, you set account deleted as true. which means we'll show, okay, your account was deleted in the message. So if you go delete account, all of a sudden this NGF is turned on. You get to see the red and the messages here. And if it had errored out, then you would have seen a different error. But yeah, so we extended here all of the necessary kind of menus and to make the HTML look good. And then with the user, like I said before, we have the user account creation date that we show, and then we show the Google photo. And because we're sending this back from the back end, all we had to do was point to that in the authentication dashboard, photo URL. So you're just adding the image and you're just sourcing it from that user object that we already had, which is really cool, plus the create date. And then on the footer, we just show the social links, apply styles to all components. So we use the buttons, the tables, the forms. So the disable user button or delete user button. Again, we just have even more stuff, the grid columns, all that good stuff. And we just took that from existing stuff. So then, yeah, hosting the demo in AWS. So we updated the application.prod properties to have server port 9081 because that's what we were running on our architecture. The database.prod properties, we needed to have our RDS username and RDS password mapped to the Postgres location and the DB name, which I load from environment variables. I'm still using this Hibernate DDL auto update. In production, you're not supposed to. This isn't really production. It's just a live demo, but it's still dev. So I left this. And then obviously I need to load the roles and everything. Excuse me. Spring backend application.java. So I did change this file, and now we have, I wanted to use UTC because that's what we should be using for the server. It's the default. The web MVC config, we're updating cores. So now we have demo.pjlindustries.com as one of the origins that we allow. Had to make that change. We changed the environment.prod to point to the 9081 API. We added Google Analytics to our index.html. So in case people want to go there, we added this script. This is the script for Google Analytics. This is the script for, both of these are for Google Analytics. And then Font Awesome is here. And then I did hard code in the end the Google Provider ID so I wouldn't have to export it. It's not really a secret. It makes everything easier if it's there. But yeah, that's kind of all I did. So, in the provider, Google Provider ID, there it is. I just hard coded it. And then in the validate Google Auth token, I hard coded it here as well to validate. So yeah, those are the changes. I'll go through the actual code again in the PR, but if you want to stay on, otherwise, follow for more, clone the repo, play around with it, build something cool. You have user authentication. If you know Angular, if you know Spring, now build your app, do the value add stuff now, and let's see what you got. Cool. All right. So if you're still here, let's go through the code. This is the README. Made some updates, nothing too crazy there. I added a build script, not needed for the demo, but just a script for helping me build the front end Angular code. The package lock.json's gone. Like we mentioned before, Tailwind forms, Tailwind CSS, auto prefixer, post CSS, prettier plugin, Tailwind. We got all that. Prettier config. This is just everything that we needed to kind of get Tailwind set up. This is the footer of socials I added to the app.component, so it's in all the views. The footer is always there. Like I put in the Google provider login. It's there. So there's a ton of stuff in the authentication dashboard. We went from this rinky-dink, simple authentication HTML to this very long Tailwind CSS. Most of it is just Tailwind gunk that I copied. There are Angular pieces here and there. I added an ngIf if your account was deleted to show a special message. Overall, though, there's not a lot there. It's just styling. It's just stuff that I wrote for text to kind of walk through the demo. And you can play around with it, but it's self-explanatory if you know HTML. And then if you are authenticated, I did the same thing. I just kept all of the different components, but they were styled, and pretty much all this is just styling. So there's a lot of code change here, but it lines up to what you see, and it should be pretty simple to look at. I guess clicking and you see toggle browser menu might be something of interest, but when you click some of these buttons, you just call the functions that are in authentication dashboard component.ts. So we added an account deleted subscription, open dropdown, open mobile menu, account deleted message, and basically you just kind of control for the state of the UI, and that's what we did here. So if we've created a user, then make sure we've reset account deleted equals false. When we delete account, if it was successful, mark it as true, and then set up the message. If it was unsuccessful, still set it as true and show the response and log out the user, but it will actually be a different error response this time. We have logout user, toggle menu. We just added kind of controls for maintaining the state of the UI the way that we do. The user button component, just added styling. The user button component, delete user button component, again, we just added styling. That's all this stuff is mostly just styling. The logout button isn't really a button, it's just in the nav bar, so we didn't need much there. View users component, we cleaned it up, made it look like a better table using Tailwind styling, not much there. Now we refresh every 3 seconds just to update a little quicker on the front end. We extended the front end model to match the back end model. So now we have the photo URL at our disposal and the created at date. In the core user service, we created the delete me endpoint service. So now we're hitting that endpoint to handle the delete me. Purging user, yeah, just some small things there, just making sure we can use that delete me endpoint, mapping to it in the controller, updating the prod environment so that we can deploy our front end to production. The fave icon we changed to the PGL Industries logo. We added the G tag, which we got from Google Analytics. They gave me this, I just had to put it here. I updated the title, and then I added the script for loading the fave icons, the free ones. More Tailwind code that I had to do for setting it up. This was actually a typo. This profile wasn't working. I needed to use Spring profiles.active to actually have this load. So this was broken, and now it works for database stuff. The database prod properties, I needed to load all of the from environment variables, all the RDS information I'm using, because that's the database I've used. I got rid of the time zone from America, New York to use AWS's UTC default. I got rid of this comment because it's a comment. I added the new origin for AWS support and production. I got rid of an unused import. I added logging for local and for prod, and then I set the prod port to 9081 because I'm using a load balancer, so I don't need to run it over HTTPS. I have my audit config, so I'm setting up my auditing configuration. Most importantly, I'm creating this auditor provider. In the user controller, I've added a delete me mapping, and I've replaced the user service delete me, or I've added the user service soft delete user. This is the implementation for loading a string which maps to a username to map who created a user or who created a record created by. User service, this is the soft delete interface, and this is the implementation for soft delete. I mean, a lot of files here. If you're still here, that's crazy. User service impl. So we have transactional to make sure that because we're actually making edits, we're updating the user. Soft delete. Otherwise, didn't really do much here. Abstract audit. So this is the abstract audit class that we've created. We have our created at, our updated at, and our created by, which we've marked appropriately and use the entity listener auditing entity listeners. Just a plain old Pojo there. We've extended our role and our user with abstract audit. So now in the database, they will have all three of those columns, fields available. And we also have the string photo URL and the created at as part of it. We added that to the backend authenticated user projection DTO. The user repository, we've made it so that we don't return any Gmail emails in that table, just fake users. And then I just did some capitalization here for readability. I added the picture URL to the new user to track that and to save it to the database when we validate the Google Auth token. And I just made sure that when we insert roles into the database when we start, we just set it to now. And that's it. Tons of files. It looks way different. It looks way better. I'm really happy with it. Yeah, if you stuck around, great. Let me know if you have any issues. Bye.